Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. How ready is Keanu Benton for year 2 of his NFL career? We talked to him at Steelers OTAs, and we answer a lot of your questions here on a Mailbag episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, y'all. So, as I said before, we're getting back to OTAs. The Steelers had a family day where the players and their families were able to go to Kennywood on Monday. So that was like their team bonding stuff. But they'll be back at the facility practicing on Tuesday, and I'll be there along with them to talk to them and get a chance to view practice and get you guys more insights from what's going on there. But we've done some other interviews we haven't put up on the show yet, and I want to get to Keanu Benton because I do think that Keanu Benton is one of the significant storylines of the 2024 season. The Steelers drafted him in the second round last year. I thought he was a quintessential Steelers pick when I talked to him at the Combine. When they got him, I thought this was amazing value for where they got him as their second round pick last year. And I thought that he showed a lot of promise last year, but I also thought DeMarvin Leal showed a lot of promise his first year, and then he did not really take a step forward, and now we're wondering about DeMarvin Leal. We'll get to DeMarvin Leal later in the show. But the point is, with Keanu Benton, how ready is he to take it the next step forward? Like I was impressed by him in the Combine, I was impressed by our conversation that we had when we talked at OTAs last week. Here is my conversation with Steelers defensive lineman Keanu Benton at Steelers OTAs.
Mainly my conditioning, making sure I'm coming back in football conditioning, because kind of last year coming from the Combine and stuff like that, it's a different type of conditioning when you get into rookie mini camp and OTAs. So I just wanted to make sure I was ready for those things.
You feel like less of a grind from that time of the year? It just seems like it's just a nonstop process, and all of a sudden you're a pro.
Can you say that again?
Does it feel like less of a grind? It's a nonstop process to prove that you belong in the NFL, and all of a sudden you are a pro.
I wouldn't say less of a grind. I would just say more detail. You're not your mind's not scattered on what can I do? What do I need to be ready for? Your first year, you kind of get your feet wet, and then you know what you need to be ready for, so that's what you prepare your body for in that first offseason.
What are some of the things that you felt like, as far as your game, translated well to the NFL last year, and then maybe something else that, like, hey, if I boost this part of my game, I'm going to do even better?
Translated well. I'm going to say just playing my blocks honestly and being a run stopper. And then something I know I need to improve on is just finishing my plays. I feel like I missed a couple sacks last year and only ended up with one. So just finishing those pass rush plays and making those pressures and stuff sacks.
There were more talk with, as far as, Coach Dunbar, Mike Tomlin, everyone talking about, hey, like, we're expecting more of you this year with your second year, or, like, higher expectations.
Yeah, they're also saying it, but I expected it myself as well. So, like, you can't stay the same and expect to succeed in this league. So that's a point that's been stressed. And then just talking to them, just making sure I'm being vocal, being heard, and taking that next step as a player and as a leader.
Have you guys talked as a unit, as far as the defensive line, about making sure to continue to assert who you guys are, what you guys want to do to do better this year?
Oh yeah, every day I hear Coach Tomlin somewhere. It starts up front, so just making sure, like, we as a D-line all know that, and we go out there and give the offensive line havoc.
Have you had a chance to talk to Kim? Like, I know he has a career at OTA. You guys are all close to each other.
Yeah, we talked to him, kind of let him know. He asked questions about what's going on here, how he can help, even though he's not here. So he still helps mentally, especially. But he's just not a guy that's not in here right now, but he's still heard as a captain.
What What are some of the new vets like Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott, you guys you've added to?
Yeah, those are good guys, and I feel like the head man does a great job of bringing guys in here that are alike. So I feel like they blend in perfectly. They're finding their role, and everybody come in with the same intentions, and that's to grind and win.
Now that you've had time to reflect on your rookie season, how did you feel about how Mike Tomlin has handled things from the highs of when you guys were winning, the lows when you guys were struggling, and to bounce back to get you guys in the playoffs?
I feel like he does exactly what we need as a head coach, and that's staying consistent. He's never too high, never too low. Just sees the things for what it is and make sure we're ready for the next week.
So there was Keanu Benton talking there. A few notes that I wanted to take away there. One, acknowledging, hey, he needs to get better at finishing in his pass rush, because you look at the production that he was able to get last year. He did stuff the run. He also didn't play a ton of snaps. I think that's another part of this. Keanu Benton needs to play more snaps this year, significantly more snaps this year. Like you look at just comparing him and Larry Ogunjobi, and look, Larry Ogunjobi is a veteran. You're paying him a lot of money. He should be paying a lot of snaps. But I think this year these snaps need to be a lot closer. Like, for example, by the end of the season, beginning of the season, we all know rookies are rookies. They're still adapting to the NFL. But by the end of the season, you saw in the last 3 games with week 17, week 18 in the wild card, Keanu Benton had 22, 20, and 33 snaps. Ogunjobi had 39, 39, and 50 snaps. And I know Ogunjobi's that guy that they brought in and you paid to do it, but Keanu Benton, I think this year, and again, that was fine last year, but this year, those numbers need to be closer, I think, for Keanu Benton to show that he's taken a step up, because that means they're trusting him to be part of that top rotation with Cam Heyward more. And again, this is all presuming that Heyward, Ogunjobi, and Benton all are healthy for the season, because then if one of them's out, the others are going to see their snap numbers go up significantly too. But I think Keanu Benton, knowing that he has to get better at finishing in his pass rush, which was the thing that we said, like, hey, this is probably going to be his weakness coming out of college. He can get better as a pass rusher. He has the tools to get better as a pass rusher, but his big thing is he's going to be big, physical, and help stuff the run. And he did that. He was very solid for the Steelers. He had 25 tackles that were designated as official stops on the year. Excuse me, I think it was actually 18 tackles, looking at the wrong line there. He had 18 tackles categorized as stops last year out of his 24 total tackles. And then he did only have 1 sack, but he also had 24 pressures. So, like, it wasn't like he wasn't able to get loose at the line of scrimmage. He was able to create pressure. If the Steelers can get Keanu Benton to take a step forward this year, he doesn't have to turn into Cam Heyward. Cam Heyward didn't even turn into Cam Heyward, the Cam Heyward that we talk about, like the Superman and leader of the defensive line, until like maybe the 5th or 6th year of his career. Stephon Tuitt didn't turn into the double-digit sack man until later in his 20s. So it took time to get there. But if Keanu Benton simply takes a step forward with guys like Heyward and Ogunjobi around him, and the other depth that we're going to get to with one of the mailbag questions, I think it's going to be a huge piece of this Steelers defense. It'll make the defensive line a lot stronger, and it'll allow everyone to kind of fill into their roles. It'll take away, if the defensive line can play at a high level and Benton's a part of that, you look at this team and you're like, it's going to be tough to find weaknesses in this defense, because you still got the best edge rushing duo in the NFL with Watt and Highsmith. Now you got Patrick Queen, Landon Roberts, and Peyton Wilson, and maybe Cole Holcomb if he comes back healthy. Your linebacker group is as good as it's been in many years. The secondary, I've talked about this in other places too. I think the secondary might be one of the more underrated parts of the team, with Joey Porter Jr. allowing the lowest completion percentage to any cornerback who was targeted over 50 times last year. Dante Jackson is not going to be stellar, but he can be a solid number 2 that's still in his prime athleticism, that can still run with defenders. Meanwhile, you have an upgraded at strong safety over Keanu Neal and Deshaun Elliott, and then you have Micah Fitzpatrick, who with all these other additions you've made should be allowed to play free safety, be the center fielder, and be the key X-factor turnover creator like he was 2 years ago when he was a first-team All-Pro guy leading the NFL with 6 interceptions. And again, it starts up front. You get it done there. If Keanu Benton takes that step up there, which I think he has a very good chance to do, the Steelers, I think defense will be on its way. It's to not just being a top 10 unit again, but being even higher, maybe even top 5, maybe even top 3 if they're able to get things done. But like I said, we got a lot of mailbag questions to get to. We'll get to all of them here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time. Game Time is the app you need to download right to your phone right now to help you buy tickets to your favorite events without it being a stressful effort. Because now we know all the NFL schedule for next year, and it's time to book for your Steelers tickets. And the best place to do that is with Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy all your tickets for your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They give you killer deals on last-minute tickets, and they have a best price guarantee that can't be beat, and you can save up to 60% off the price of tickets, buying last minute for sports, concerts, and so many more events. If you want Christmas Day tickets to the Steelers versus the Chiefs, guess what? Game Time's got those. Home opener tickets against the Chargers, you bet they've got those as well. Plan your trip to Acrisure Stadium to root on your Pittsburgh Steelers right on the app with Game Time, or go to their website, gametime.co. Plus, the Game Time best price guarantee means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue with our show. We go to the mailbag. We were going to have Alan Saunders on. He wasn't able to make it. We'll try to get him on later in the week, but figured this was a time, since we didn't have more new OTA clips to go to take some of the questions that you guys have been calling and asking. And as always, if you want to get your question on the show, it's as simple as calling 412-223-6644. That's 412-223-6644. Leave your name, your question, and leave your name, where you're from, and keep your question under a minute, and we'll try to get your question on the show. We have quite a few calls, and we're going to try to get through as many of them as we can in this show. We'll lead off with a question that kind of trails off of what we were doing just before. This is Matt from New York asking about the Steelers defensive line.
Hey, Chris. Love the show. Matt from New York. I am really concerned about the D-line. I know that we got Curry. I know Ogunjobi's going to be back. Hopefully Cam will be healthy. Benton's coming on. We signed Montrevious. But it still feels a little low on depth. And with the history of Cam most recently and Ogunjobi, I'm a little worried. Would love a deep dive from you. Thanks so much, CC.
Thank you, Matt, for calling in for the Locked On Steelers call-in line. Again, that's 412-223-6644 to get your question on the air, just like Matt from New York was. But, Matt, I share your concerns about the defensive line, because as much as I'm saying, like, hey, if Benton is that dude and Heyward and Ogunjobi are healthy, this defensive line's in a good spot. But if one or two of those guys go down, there are going to be serious questions as far as who can fill in. Now, you still have Montrevious Adams, who we've seen can be a solid platoon guy as part of the defensive line. You do have guys coming back like Isaiah Loudermilk, like DeMarvin Leal, like Braden Fajoko, and you still got a guy like Dean Lowry and Logan Lee that you're hoping can step up. But bottom line is, you don't have that fourth and fifth guy that can come in and dominate the way that some defensive lines of the past have had, and maybe not dominate, but play at a high level that you expect out of a solid backup. I think Montrevious Adams is really good depth for the Steelers, but part of this I think really hinges on DeMarvin Leal. DeMarvin Leal slimmed down a little bit. He wanted to get quicker for his base because he felt like he wasn't quick enough at the line of scrimmage. He needs to be quick and sturdy at the point of attack. If DeMarvin Leal steps up this year, I think that solidifies a lot of things for the Steelers. And let's be clear. DeMarvin Leal, I thought, had a very promising rookie season, dealt with injuries, missed time, but came back. And when he did, looked like he was showing a lot of the really good things that he showed in college. Then his second year didn't show that as much, and then was a healthy scratch towards the end of the season, and that became a problem. And I think that was where the Steelers kind of, needed more help from him. So this year he has to prove that he deserves to not only get a helmet, but to be on the field for the Steelers. If he can do that, I think that goes a long way for the Steelers. But again, I do think the Steelers, I think Keanu Benton's a good answer. I do think also being fair to Cam Heyward. I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, the injury history. That man played 2 straight 17-game seasons before last year when he suffered some rough injuries. Now, could that mean that these injuries linger over, or that he has more coming up because he is getting older? Maybe, possibly. We don't know. But I wouldn't let 1 year discharacterize what's been a mostly healthy career for Cam Heyward, especially at the position that he's played and for how long he's played the position. Again, this guy was drafted in 2011. I was finishing up undergrad in 2011. That's kind of how far back this goes. For Cam Heyward. I mean, he and I are like the same age, and I'm like 35. So, this he's been doing it. I'd give Cam Heyward the benefit of the doubt to say, like, hey, he can come back, find a way to be healthy and be there for most of the season. But I do share your concerns of who's behind those three starters in Heyward, Benton, and Ogunjobi. Can Adams still be a good platoon player? Can Leal step up and be the guy that they drafted him to be in the third round? Can Loudermilk be better than what he's been? Can someone else step up that we're not sure who they are, in Lowry Lee or maybe a Jacob Slade who's still on the roster, or Braden Fajoko, who we all thought was thinking maybe he could be a decent run stuffer, and then he wasn't really used much last year. If the Steelers can find answers there, that could be the key moving forward to answer your question. But it certainly is a concern, and when the pads go on in training camp, it'll be something that we're all watching for sure. I wanted to get to another question here. This one comes from Tyler in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Tyler, take it away.
Hey, Chris. It's Tyler here from Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Big fan of the show, man. But I had a quick question. Since it doesn't seem that we're really trying to add, maybe not, add new receivers to this group, what do we think about moving Connor Heyward to receiver, or one of them? We've seen we have a surplus of tight ends, so maybe we can move him over. What do you think? Thanks for the call, man.
Thank you for your call, Tyler. Again, it's 412-223-6644 to get your question on the air. So I would not be moving Connor Heyward to wide receiver anytime soon. I think that he has the talent to make some ridiculous catches. I covered him in college when he played in the Peach Bowl and made some ridiculous catches there. I think that he could be a weapon. But I think what more so could happen here, if you want to move a tight end to the wide receiver spot and help out in there and give you and kind of spread out some usage there, I think the move is rather maybe having some 3 tight end sets with 1 wide receiver and 1 running back, where you come out and it looks like a heavy formation, but then all of a sudden Pat Freiermuth's lined up out wide like he's a wide receiver along with George Pickens, and then you have Heyward and Washington as your tight ends, and then you could have Washington be the traditional like strong side tight end, and then you could have Heyward motion around because he's more of an H-back. You can move him to fullback. You can line him up in the slot and then move him around, have him be an extra blocker or be an extra receiver out of the backfield. I think there's some flexibility with this tight end room. And there's also, talking about the tight end depth, they've got Rodney Williams, Hot Rod as they call him, and he was a guy that was really impressive both in special teams and in preseason when he was being targeted. They're going to try to find a way to keep him. So maybe they do try to find a creative way to use tight ends. Maybe that's why they're holding up on this wide receiver trade that we've been talking about for about a month or so. Since whenever the draft finished, we were like, well, they didn't go get the receiver in the top rounds, so that means they probably are trading for one, right? And then they haven't. And we as we talked about on yesterday's show with Nick Farabaugh, I do think there's still a chance it could happen and they could go get that guy. But I don't think that would be stopped by the tight ends being more flexible. I think that's another wrinkle of the offense that if we see it coming, it would make sense because they have the athleticism to pull it off. Pat Freiermuth can line up a wide receiver. Connor Heyward can do those type of things. I think that you don't want to – I would not put him over, maybe a Calvin Austin or a Roman Wilson or some of the guys that you could pull from the receiver room to do that job, unless you were doing this in a trickier situation where like, hey, you're just going no huddle, you're rotating this guy around the field, and one minute he's lining up in the slot and running quick routes. The next minute he's lining up as a fullback and run blocking for Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren. That's where I could see Connor Heyward coming in, but not strictly as a wide receiver. I don't think any of these tight ends will do that. I think that Pat Freiermuth can line up as one in some special formations that the Steelers can put together with Arthur Smith. But no, I don't think that those guys are. I still think that getting another wide receiver should still be on the table for the Steelers. But still a good question to explore all the different options that are available because Connor Heyward does have a good set of hands on him. We'll get to talking more about your questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast with your mailbag questions. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We will be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. It's finals time in both the NBA and the NHL, and baseball is still in full swing, which makes FanDuel your #1 place to bet on every game in all the leagues. Game 1 of the NBA Finals is coming up Thursday, and it's giving the Celtics 6.5 points, while Jason Tatum is the favorite for the NBA Finals as the NBA Finals MVP at -120. But with Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and Jaylen Brown, and all these other options out there, there's plenty of chances for you to win big on FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 or more bet. That's $150 you can use on point spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon to take advantage of this offer today. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon for new customers to get $150 back in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins, and that's from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue taking your questions on the Locked On Steelers mailbag. Remember, you could call in with your questions to 412-223-6644. Leave your name, your question, and leave your name where you're from, and keep your question under a minute. We'll try to get you on this. So we now switch topics to talking a little bit about Pat, draft considerations, it's concerning one of the later picks the Steelers had, and if they should have gone a different direction. Here's Lawrence from Norristown, Pennsylvania, asking about Mason McCormick.
Hey, this is Lawrence from Norristown, Pennsylvania. Just calling to ask a question about that guard that we had drafted. I believe his name is Mason or something like that. We had drafted him when Cedric Van Pran was still on the board. I haven't really heard too much about that guy during training camp, but my question is, I don't really have that much confidence in Nate Herbig and starting at coming in as a backup at center, and I don't really hear any productivity about that guard that may sit the whole year. So my question is, do you think it was it would have been a smarter move to get Cedric Van Pran, and we have two of the top 3 centers in the draft competed out in camp, and worst come to worst, God forbid, and somebody get hurt, we still have a nice fresh young rookie who's played this position his whole career, and it's not like a Nate Herbig just switching over from guard. So let me know what you think. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Lawrence. Also, apologies. I did mess up the graphics there. I forgot to switch his name over when I was making the card. So if it said Matt there, that was actually Lawrence from Norristown, Pennsylvania. Thank you very much for your question, Lawrence. So a few things. Let's address this. So Mason McCormick is the guard that he's talking about. He was drafted in the 4th round by the Steelers. Mason McCormick, I think, and I've talked about him before on this show, I think he has the potential to become a starter as early as next year. That's how good I think Mason McCormick can be. When I looked up his tape, when I saw how much of a road grader he is very much the embodiment of a physical guard that if you put in between 2 really good players, like let's put him at right guard next year because James Daniels is on the last year of his deal right now. You put him at right guard, you're putting him most likely between Troy Fautano at right tackle and Zach Frazier at center. That would be, I think, 3 guys who could absolutely bulldoze together on the right side of the line when it comes to the run game. And I think that's the ultimate goal, is to get him there. And to be honest, I think I graded him as a better pure run blocker than Cedric Van Pran. I think Cedric Van Pran did a lot of nice things in the middle part of the line. I think that he's able to communicate. He'd be a center, but I don't think he's a dominant guy. And that's why, honestly, Cedric Van Pran was a 5th round pick for a reason. And granted, Mason McCormick was a 4th round pick, but I'm not sure that Cedric Van Pran would be competing with Zach Frazier. I think that he would end up being a solid backup. And sure, maybe he gives you more confidence than a Nate Herbig, who they didn't even want to use as a backup, or they never once used him in place of Mason Cole last year, even when Mason Cole couldn't snap. But I think that the plan here is that they see Mason McCormick as a guy that could earn a starting role at the guard position sooner rather than later. Not this year, of course, because they have Seumalo and Daniels, and both of those guys played really well, I felt, in the 2023 season. So I expect them to do so again in the 2024 season, and maybe even better with the help that'll be around them. But at some point the Steelers are going to let go Daniels or Seumalo. If they do re-sign Daniels next year, that's great, but Seumalo would be coming shortly after him, and I don't think they would re-sign both of these guys, especially because Seumalo is older. McCormick may be looking at just needing to wait 1 year, maybe 2, before he becomes a starter on this offensive line, as long as he does his job and shows that he's ready for it. It's not a guarantee that he owns that. Maybe he ends up being a bust. Maybe he ends up being a bad pick and it doesn't work out in the 4th round. I actually don't think there's really a bust in the 4th round. Like, 4th round picks are very much shots in the dark a lot of times, and you're hoping for the best there. But point being, I think Mason McCormick was a fine pick. I think that he could turn out as a starter at guard, whereas Cedric Van Pran, I think he'd be a very clear backup center, which is important to have. But I think that the upside of McCormick was more, which is why they went with him, and which is why I think they'll be patient with him as he continues to develop on the offensive line. This next question comes from Tom from Lehigh Valley, who addresses something that I just intentionally skipped over because I did not want to give this the time of day on a show, but Tom asked about it, so Tom gets to talk about it. Tom, tell him what we're talking about here.
Hello, Chris. My name is Tom from the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. Not so much a question, but just I keep hearing about the ridiculous statement that Justin Field be used for kickoff returns. It's never been done in the NFL. It has been done in the NFL. Joe Theismann, when he first came out, they utilized his talent as a punt returner. And then 1 or 2 years later, he became the starter. Billy Kimmer was the starting quarterback, and then we know what Theismann did after that. So it could be done. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the question. Appreciate the history lesson, because Tom is right, and I didn't even know this. I have to admit, I didn't know Joe Theismann ever returned kicks. All I knew is Joe Theismann was part of the Washington team that won a Super Bowl, and then he got that horrible injury at the same spot in the field. Alex Highsmith had the horrible injury that ended both of their careers and all that stuff. So I didn't know that. But I'll say this, Tom. I looked it up. That happened in 1974. That ain't happening now. Also, Justin Fields was asked about this in the Steelers locker room last week, and he kind of laughed it off and just said there's no idea of that it's even been brought up to him. That's not what he's in Pittsburgh to do. I don't see this happening in any way. And to be clear, where this came from, because I know there's probably somebody listening in their car or while they're walking their dog and thinking, why the heck does anyone think that Justin Fields is returning a kick? There's a reason. A few weeks ago, way back when, Jaylen Warren was on Cam Heyward's podcast, and he joked about it, saying that, Danny Smith brought it up. Danny Smith, the Steelers special teams coach, brought it up at, just as a conversation, and he brought it up to be funny. And, it was kind of like a ha-ha, not that serious situation. But then it kind of people kind of ran with it, and we're like, well, wait a minute. Could this actually be a thing? Could Justin Fields return kicks? Who knows? Because he is a 1,000-yard rusher. He can do all this. He can do all that. Why not put him back there? Why not give him a shot? You don't need him to start. You can put Russell Wilson as a starter. They're not doing it. Jaylen Warren was joking. Danny Smith was joking. Justin Fields knows they're joking. That's not something they're going to do. The Steelers are going to have a quarterback battle. Whoever doesn't win that quarterback is going to be on the bench. And we just saw how last year, how backup quarterbacks can be essential to you staying alive in a season. You do not want this offense to have to go to Kyle Allen after you went and got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields this season. So, with all that being said, Tom, I appreciate the history lesson, because you taught me something today. I did not know Joe Theismann ever returned anything on special team, but I do know that Justin Fields ain't doing that unless a lot of things go wrong for the Steelers in their special teams room. And they like, we need somebody fast back there. Justin, get on the field. But there would have to be like 6 or 7 guys that get hurt before that even happened. They're not letting that guy hit. I still think that Justin Fields has the potential to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL. And I think that the Steelers see that too. And that's why they went and got him with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson can start this year. If he ends up stinking, Justin Fields can take over. But I think that they see Justin Fields to have the potential to grow into a franchise guy. And why would you put him in more harm's away by putting him on kick returns? That's what you got Cordero Patterson for. That's what he's going to do. That's what Calvin Austin's for. That's what he can do. I think that those guys make a lot more sense than Justin Fields. And I think that long term, that will end up being the answer for the Steelers while Justin Fields works. We try to see how good of a quarterback he can be for the Steelers. We're at less than a kick returner. But again, good point by you pulling up the research there, Tom, from Lehigh Valley. Thanks again for everyone for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. And thank you to all of our callers, Matt, Tyler, Lawrence, and Tom, with all your questions for tuning into the show. Thanks to everyone. We'll be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, talking about what we saw at Steelers OTAs on Tuesdays and how we're seeing everything move forward here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.